podcast where we explore the landscape of the college theater world and try to demystify this daunting audition process. I'm your host, Charlie Murphy, director of MTCA. That's Musical Theater College Auditions. And today we've got a bright and sunny show lined up for you. My daughter is obsessed with the word sunny right now, and bunny, anything unny, she's into it. David Williams is on the show today from the University of Miami, and I think it is a really great episode. David is someone I've been hoping to get on for a while, and it was well worth the wait. This interview is jam-packed with tidbits that are worthy of takeaways. So I'm going to give you a podcast first in a pre-interview takeaway, which is really just to say we chat a bit about communication while on a wait list, and really communication in general in this kind of post-acceptance period while people are making their final decisions, and the value of how important communication is, which leads me to remind you, any of you who have not signed up for our Waiting on a Waitlist Q&A we're having this week, I highly encourage it. That will be with Leo, our other director, and last week's podcast guest, chatting with some of our alumni who have navigated waitlists successfully in the recent past. This is something that is such a big topic each year that this year we decided we didn't want to just squeeze it into other webinars, but to give it a whole other separate conversation in and of itself. That is 9 p.m. Eastern on this Friday, April 14th, for those who listen in the first 48 hours of release, as you all should. So please register for that. We're also starting our Spring Faculty Masterclass series this week with Catherine Moore of Carnegie Mellon, a previous podcast guest. So for anyone interested in those classes, they're almost all completely sold out, but there are very few spots available in Pace's class as well as in the dance classes. But those will sell out, so if you want to grab one of those spots, please do it soon. The other pre-takeaway I want to do, because David talked about it again like so many of our teachers do, is just a huge, huge congratulations to the class of 2023. I know we're not at May 1st yet when we'll do our big official celebration, but if you're an MTCA student sitting there stressed with multiple good options, trying desperately to make a final decision, please just remember that stressed out junior that you were when you began this process, hoping that just one school would actually accept you. Well, here you are. You've earned the right for this amazing, stressful decision, and a huge congrats to you on that. David did specifically say how awesome this class was. And it's also just like thrilling to hear about an awesome class that has nothing to do with COVID. The past few years, all of our classes have been amazing, but you kind of couldn't describe them without words like resilient or they're amazing fighters. Oh God, they had to navigate the crazy up and downs of all of this. And while that is true of all classes in this process, resiliency is so important as an actor, but especially in the college process. This class of 2023 feels like they got to shine on their own merits as performers, and that is just thrilling to me. Using my same metric of think back to when you were juniors wanting just one school, I have to do that a bit myself and just like think back to 2021. It was hard to see the possibility of 2023 being this virus-free in its thinking. So yay, spring is sprung, and that huge congrats to the class of 2023, most of whom likely will have made up their final decisions before you hear from me again in a college episode at the very end of this month. So we'll celebrate you for real with all of your finals to come. But just to say now, irrespective of what decisions you make, and irrespective of your amazing results that we've seen come in so far, congrats on an awesome process, class of 2023, students and parents. And with that, let's get to David Williams from the University of Miami. Well, we are so honored to be joined by David Williams of the University of Miami. David has a BM from that same university and 99% of an MM, he says. Co-founder and music director of Music Theater Italy, a classical pianist and accompanist who's worked throughout the country and in Europe. He performed in tons of ballet companies, has many theatrical credits, and is now a senior lecturer at the University of Miami, which is located in Coral Gables, Florida. They have class sizes of about 14 to 16 and offer many degrees, BFAs in MT, BAs in theater arts, etc. David, welcome on the pod. How are you doing today?
Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. So I gave that super brief overview of a bio,
Yeah.
But I'd love to hear a little bit of like just your journey, and maybe you can hear about the 99% and the 1%, but your journey to Miami.
I've always done theater ever since I was like 4 or 5. And as a pianist, I was always really in demand to play the piano. They abuse is the wrong word, but they abuse your talents in the theater.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've always been around it, but I've always been around classical music also. And for years and years and years, I was a working pianist, and just by sheer wonderful luck, a colleague here at UM asked me if I would do them the honor of coming and playing for what they called barriers at the time,
Mm-hmm.
which I said, sure, I'll do that. And as it turned out, the entire BFA program before I joined here had to do barriers, which was basically a jury where every single
Mm-hmm.
one of them sang for the acting faculty 2 songs. So at the end of 400 hours, they said, "Hey, you're good at this. Would you like a job?" And thinking it would be, I don't know, a couple of months at best, has now turned into way over 20 years.
Wow. Yeah.
And I find it the most wonderful thing in my life is to make the transition from pure music into music with words and theater. It's just what I live. I've always lived it, and this
Mm-hmm.
fell into my lap, and now I get to share it with BFA students, and nothing's better.
So tell me a little bit about, so in your experience of your 20 some years
Mhm.
at
Yeah.
Miami, what do you feel like makes a University of Miami student? What are the sort of unique qualities that you see in a lot of U of Miami students?
Well, I think the definition of unique is what I see, and it bears out every single time. We don't look for a type. We look for a diverse population in every definition of that. And I need to make sure that the person that I pick for our department is someone that I can live with, someone they can live with, that being me. And I'm very, very careful. It needs to be an example of humanity and someone who loves the idea of talking about theater,
Uh-huh.
someone who I know immediately wants to be challenged. And I don't care what that looks like, what that sounds like. The talent is obviously there, or we wouldn't be
Uh-huh.
having conversation. But it really comes down to what I know is the right type of humanity isn't the right word, but what type of personality, what
Yep.
type of wonder of the world will fit us. One of the things that we also have to be very, very careful with in our BFA program is because we're located in a really academically challenging university. And they look at those applications the same way they look at physicists and pre-med students. They don't separate out artists, which is great because I wind up with very, very smart students, and I don't think
Hmm.
there's anything known as there is no such thing as an overeducated actor.
Hmm.
But there seems to be some difficulty in some very good art schools around the country, high schools, with making sure that that academic portion of their
Yeah.
of their education is at the high level that we need. And then they have to meet the talent requirements. And so there's a very small
It's a lot.
diagram of the perfect student for us. But if it's someone that like comes in and displays, oh, I don't know, overtly diva behavior, I it's not gonna work for us.
Yep. No, I love that. And you will talk a little bit more in the second half about the audition process and the admissions process. But I will say, you mentioned that you take a lot of time with your students. And that I'll say that is one of the reasons I went, oh my gosh, I have to have David on. I've been thinking of that for years because the number of times I'll be at Unifieds and people will come and go, I just had the greatest experience. This audition was they took so much time with me. And I was like, I've written that down for 10 years. And
You literally just made my day. I think it's something that I am proud of. I
yeah.
like doing this. It's important. And also, I don't know why I wouldn't want to spend time with people who've spent so many years getting ready for this. I feel like I'm cheating them if I say thank you next.
Yeah, there are schools that do it, and I respect them that go do it, and with very little conversation, pick a class, and they feel comfortable with it. I cannot imagine spending 4 years with someone and not spending 10 minutes talking to them. Yeah.
I can't afford to make a mistake with the small numbers.
Uh-huh. That's right.
I think some schools know they can take 150 kids and graduate X.
But if you're getting 14 kids, it's, yeah.
I can't, I don't want to. UM is expensive. I don't want anybody to make a mistake. And again, our theater world is difficult. Working in the theater takes a lot of stuff out of people. So I think we really should be the kindest people in the world and demonstrate that.
Let's get into a little bit of the curriculum. So, if I'm spending 4 years at the University of Miami, how am I going to come out changed? Let's say I come in, I'm an interesting person, I've got all the humanity, great audition. what am I going to work on over the series of 4 years, especially let's say as a musical theater major, that's going to sort of add skills to my repertoire?
I need to define something and then answer that question.
Please.
So we used to have two distinct tracks. We used to have an acting track and a musical theater track. What we found was that people who went through the musical theater track were taking the same acting classes as the acting
Mm-hmm.
students, and the acting students weren't getting the music training. And the kids that were immediately graduated from us, it was the musical theater kids that were getting all the jobs, including the
Mm-hmm.
non-musical theater jobs. So
Yep.
we said, there's something wrong here. And so now we call ourselves a comprehensive program. If you slit a couple of veins and did some DNA testing of all our kids, they are definitely musical theater. Their DNA reads musical theater.
Mm-hmm.
But we want kids that really want to study everything and are not afraid of it. When I was a kid, the word triple threat was like something magical. Now it's just, it's like the Olympics. A triple Salchow is nothing. And so now we want kids to come in with talent and want to study everything in order, A, to understand more of the theater that we're doing, but also, quite frankly, and I hate to put it in a financial way, but are more
Yeah.
employable, period.
We talk about it all the time that more of the money is in the musical theater world. Yeah.
Exactly. But if you look at the world right now and you watch some of the television franchises, my favorite, the Law and Order ones, they're all musical theater kids that are
Uh-huh.
that are the stars of these shows.
Mm-hmm.
There's something going on in the world right now that people are understanding that musical theater is not some sort of cheap stepchild of the acting world. We
Uh-huh.
actually know a lot of style, and
Yep.
I think that's what we do. We teach style. That said, we don't want kids that are coming in that are perfect at everything. Well, I would love that, but there's no reason to go to school. There's no
Uh-huh.
reason to go to school. We find that if kids come in as a strong actor and a little shy of their singing voice, they tend to work harder. And the truth is, I'm looking at my current junior class. There are a couple people in there that came not thinking they could sing, and quite frankly, are out singing everybody.
Hmm.
Um, that pressure, if that's the right word. I think that might be a little dismissive. Um, Really serves these kids, and they work harder.
Yep.
The same
Yep.
thing goes for dance or movement.
Take me through a little bit, if you want to get a little granular in terms of the freshman through sophomore and then
Sure.
junior, senior year. What is the trajectory of what I'm learning as through the 4 years?
So much. We are in a major university. But if you look at just the curricula for the university, you're going to say, for our department within the university, how are we operating? Um, I have friends that run programs everywhere, and I look at the curricula and I chuckle a little bit because their lives are so much easier than the lives here. We have been doing this for so long, we don't actually, how do I put this? I'll just say it. We don't exactly tell the truth on our credit value. So our classes within the BFA look like a pure conservatory. But of
Uh-huh.
course, as we start going into the sophomore year, we start adding the required university courses, and we can get more into that later.
Yes, please. Yeah.
So my freshmen, fresh folks, let's degender that word once and for all, are taking somewhere between 12 and 14 classes, which if you were looking at a regular university, of course, is impossible
Mm-hmm.
because they would have to be 3 credits apiece, and that would overload. Most of our classes on paper read 1 credit, even though that's not actually the content,
Mm-hmm.
the contact hours. So uh, we take everything in the freshman year. We take movement, singing, dance, voice and speech, private voice lessons, acting, stagecraft, and
Mm-hmm.
X, Y, and Z as well. Whereas some other universities, the credit values read accurately can only take 4 or 5 classes max.
Uh-huh.
So we basically grab you as a fresh folk and start you off, I think, around 9 o'clock in the morning. And then depending on what your crew or assignments are, we would finish around 6:30 and pick up
Mm-hmm.
again at 7 for those 6 weeks that you're in crew or technical support for the shows.
Mm-hmm.
Then come the second year, you're guaranteed casting. And so your evenings are taken for 12 weeks per semester. And then the percentage of theater classes, as opposed to university classes, starts to switch.
Hmm.
Not by much, but by the junior and the senior year, you're taking all the academics that are required, which are not just general academics. We have a different way of doing it. We have something called cognates, where you make basically little mini minors, which is
Hmm.
the definition of a liberal education. And that's another thing that I spoke about earlier. The requirements of the university are vast, and so are the requirements of the BFA. So that also talks uh, talks particularly to a unique type of student.
Yeah. Let's stay on that.
Um,
I'd love to hear a little bit about what are those potential minors that, maybe are minors that people commonly get, or what are my possibilities if I want to get a minor or even, God forbid, a double major? Is that possible within Miami?
the possibilities are vast, but also the BFA schedule is rather tyrannical.
Hmm.
So there are ways of obtaining what you want. We have the discussions with our students. Do you need the minor or do you need the classwork? What do you want? Or,
Hmm.
particularly since we have very academically gifted students coming into our program, what are you coming what are you coming in with already that is
Hmm.
transferable? What are your APs? What did you take summer classes? Did you take early university classes? The more you can open that up, the more possible it is to get a minor. And in some cases, depending on what you choose, we have a great communications school in the university,
Hmm.
can also become a major. We've had kids have psych majors. Those are rare. But again, it depends on the student. A lot of students come in with a great idea to minor and double major, and by the time the theater bug has completely taken over their lives, that importance falls off. It's very important to some parents, and I get that,
Hmm.
but I can't promise anything without being able to look very carefully at the transcript of a student coming in. Um, I think it's important, but also the work of the theater is so vast and so time consuming
Yep.
that I will say to some parents, well, your child really needs to sleep and eat sometime.
Right. They're already triple majoring in musical theater.
Yeah, you really are, if not quadrupling. However, I love academics myself, and I would do that to myself as well. But we need to be kinder and gentler to ourselves and the world right
Hmm.
now. And so it's all possible. Communications, lots of design elements are
Uh-huh.
possible in minors and majors. What else is out there that people do? Oh, announcing, television announcing, sports announcing.
Uh-huh.
Uh, a few kids have looked into education. The university is massive. You
Uh-huh.
name it, it's here. But I can't promise that because obviously our BFA requirement is non-negotiable,
Right.
and the time that we teach our non-negotiable classes are the prime time for the university. But it still happens. It's not an easy thing, but the kids that are successful at that are very successful at that and are usually graduating at the top of the university at the same time as doing.
Of the musical theater, you mentioned being comprehensive, which I think is a great word. Is there a discipline of the three that you spend either more credit hours or where you feel like there's more focus? Or maybe another way to ask it is do people think of a University of Miami student as being particularly strong in one of the three disciplines?
Yeah, I do, and I believe it strongly because I think it overrides everything, and I suspect most places think this. It's an acting program, first, second, third, fourth, 100th.
Hmm.
Again, the DNA is musical theater, but our students are actors,
Hmm.
and you can spot them a million miles away. And maybe a better word than actor, I think, although I don't know any better word than actor, um, a person who understands style and able
Hmm.
to move through style. So a stylist, someone who can move from Shakespeare into Sondheim into, I don't know, a tap number. It's
Uh-huh.
style. It's all acting. It's all storytelling. But it's understanding the rules that we have learned throughout the years, and then deciding what to do with those rules. But we're firm believers: learn the rules and then break them, but don't break them before you know them.
You started to do a little bit of there, but if you would mind, just give me a little bit more of a definition of, imagine if I'm a parent listener and I hear style and I'm thinking like fashion or whatever. What do we mean when we say style in the theater?
For me at least, style is the set of rules or the set of conventions that make a certain type of performance, either being a song,
Hmm.
a dance, or a play. What are the rules that we all can understand, that is the operating force for that? So we
Uh-huh.
could say, Sondheim, here are the rules, and if we obey those, we're actually performing stylistically correct. But when we know those, we also know what rules don't apply to other
Uh-huh.
things. And I think that's the big thing. We all say we really like X, Y, and Z, but we need to actually go much deeper and go, why don't we like it? Oh, maybe we don't understand why we don't like it.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I didn't understand what those rules were. What's the umbrella under which that's operating? And we see it all the time, and we accept it for everything in our lives. We understand what a commercial on television is, that operates under a certain style.
Uh-huh.
We understand what Deadpool is, and if we expected Deadpool to be Schindler's List, we would all be very disappointed in both movies. And so that's style. Once you
Yeah.
get what's going on, you understand it. And I don't know. I think style gets a bad rap, that word, right now. And so
Uh-huh.
maybe that's why I like the idea of, it's just the rules that govern it. And
Yep.
those, they're mutable. We can go left or right, but we need to know what they are and then decide what to do with it. And I am on my soapbox on this, so forgive me.
No, we wanted. That was so well said. I think it's really helpful. It's helpful for, I think, our listeners to hear philosophically also this how you talk about this kind of stuff. I'd love to talk about dance a little bit. So if I come in as a dancer, maybe I'm a really advanced, or if I come in and I'm really not advanced, how does that work in terms of, do I work within my freshman, sophomore
Yeah,
cohort, or am I leveled in terms of across the classes? How does that
right.
work?
We used to level, but as we added more acting and more movement and other classes, we found that was causing us problems with our scheduling, and it
Uh-huh.
just made it impossible. We didn't. There's just not. There's a very finite amount of space. But then we thought about it very carefully and realized we don't level anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And no one is coming in at the same level in any aspect of their training. And we happen to have a really great dance teacher that can teach just like really great acting teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, we don't change classes because someone is a better Shakespearean than someone else. So philosophically, I haven't found it necessary. I
Uh-huh.
suppose if we went above 20, I think we would have a different conversation.
Yep.
But at 20, I trust my dance teachers implicitly,
Yep.
absolutely, to be able
No,
to do
totally
that.
makes sense. You know, and it's a different construction of a program, to your point, when you have 14 students versus when you have 80. You know, it's just a different
Absolutely. At
construction.
at 80, you not only do you need a level, you need to cut
You need
those
to split
numbers
them into
down so
many
people don't
groups.
get
Yeah,
hurt.
exactly.
But at 14, we're
Yeah.
we're we're in the safe zone.
I'd love to talk a little bit about maybe that senior year, or it certainly could start earlier, in terms of how you prepare your students for the launch into the business, from the idea of a showcase or meeting agents, how you learn about that part of the world. I'd love to hear, like, how am I going to be prepared to launch?
So yes, we do showcase. In fact, just a few days ago, I came back from New York and we had an extraordinarily successful showcase that I am incredibly proud of our seniors. And they were seen by a lot of people.
Mm.
And so that's not generally the rule anymore, but we figured out a way to make that happen. But how we prepare kids for the industry, I think, is from day one in class. The expectations are, we're going to learn the protocols, the again, here we go, the style, the rules of the theater, and the expectations are, in classes will be from minute go enforcing that. We will be talking about, well, this is the reason we're learning this. This is the reason you're going to say this. This is the reason you're going to slate, because it's going to show up in 4 years. And quite frankly, if we're not practicing professionalism for 4 years, it puts an undue burden on that senior class to figure things
Mm-hmm.
out. We're doing it from the
Mm-hmm.
minute go. And we're actors. We perform what we rehearse. So if we're rehearsing it for 4 years, we're we're so far ahead. It's
Mm-hmm.
not a challenge. Like, how do I talk to people? That said, we have everything in the curricula that leads up to it. Showcases in the last semester. The book building for that showcase is in the first semester
Mm-hmm.
of the senior year, and auditioning is in their junior year. Uh, But before that happens, they're already building their books,
Mm-hmm.
and
Totally.
there is not a class that I start without saying, "Has anybody thought of any material for the showcase?" And I'm talking
Uh-huh.
about first semester kids.
Uh-huh.
And I like that because because I love how it changes over the years. Things that they sure that they came in as first year students that thought that was the greatest piece of theater and they're going to do it for the showcase, all of a sudden becomes just something that they would never dream of ever putting on
Uh-huh.
stage again.
Uh-huh.
And that's one of the joys, watching the growth over the 4 years and seeing where they're going, and I could see it, and
Mm-hmm.
that's, for me at least, one of the joys of the job. I know the difference between a first, second, third, and fourth year student.
Uh-huh.
It's so obvious to me, and it's obvious to the students as well. Everybody looks at the seniors with awe,
Uh-huh.
and then we'll never be able to make that at every single class. It happens,
Yeah. That's so
and
cool.
that's one of my lucky positions. I'm teaching all of the classes. I mean, not all classes, but I teach all
Right.
classes, and I could see that, and
Yeah.
it's wonderful to see the kids acknowledge that, and they all do.
Yep.
They all do.
I'd love to talk a little bit about where the kind of breakdown of where your students come from, like all over the country and the world, and then also kind of where do they end up. So you mentioned they're all actors first, so or not all actors first, but that's the structure of the program. So how many end up in New York, LA, around the country? How many stay in Florida? I'd love to hear both where they come from and then where do they end up.
Yeah, they come from around the country and around the world, mostly I would say from the northeast part of our country. We
Mm-hmm.
used to have a huge contingent of people from the west side, of our land. Again, it depends on what these auditions look like,
Mm-hmm.
and what the give and take. So they're coming from everywhere. Not as much necessarily from our home state, and I think that has to do with, people have wanderlust, and they should go
Mm-hmm.
maybe someplace that they don't live already.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean I don't have a lot of Florida students or Miami students, but the majority of our students are not. Where they go again depends on that class makeup, and I'd like to say, as a positive, uh, every class that we've ever had doesn't look like, sound like, sing like, act like
Mm-hmm.
any class above or below it. There's
Mm-hmm.
just not a type that's filled, and so whatever that class zeitgeist is, whatever's in the water when they come as their first semester students, they tend to move in that miasma, and they tend to go in the same place. So a couple of years ago, almost all of them wound up in LA. Polling the seniors that are graduating any day now, well, while we were in New York, every last hand went up that said they were moving to New York. And so it's like, okay, this is interesting. I'd like to figure out how that happens. But more importantly, what I think it says is that the students that matriculate here feel that they have in fact done what the program says, comprehensively taught them, and they can go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
A few kids stay in Miami. The tech kids tend to stay in Miami because they're hireable immediately.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I'll go ahead and say what everybody in the country knows: our tech students are so valuable,
Uh-huh.
and hireable at a rate that surpasses actors. I hate saying that for actors, but it just happens to be
This
the
is true.
truth. So our tech kids intern in Miami and tend to wind up in some of the really great theater positions here.
I know there's also a thriving, scene in Miami, especially if you in the independent film world.
Yeah,
Some of my schoolmates from Carnegie Mellon ended up in Miami, and
yeah,
my best friend, who's a Juilliard grad, he was from Miami, ended up back in Miami, working in Miami. Like there is a world there in terms of the art scene that's real.
yeah, it is, and it's getting bigger by the second. As a shameless plug, I'm directing a musical right now by my newest best friend in the world, Polly Penn, who's written a lot of
Mm.
very small, marvelous chamber pieces, and we're going to be performing it at the end of this month at the Paris Art Museum, which is maybe one of the most beautiful modern art buildings that is built in the last 20 years. And the noise that this is making in this city, because it's just an extraordinary opportunity for everybody involved, and they've never
Hmm.
done theater in this building. And everybody's interested. It's actually flabbergasting to me the number of emails that I'm getting. Oh wow, it's not insular, the community. Everybody's like, "What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you
Hmm.
doing?" Which is really it's heartwarming. I
Yep.
think Miami is turning into something that it has not been for a while.
I want to do a little section on people choosing your school. So now let's imagine for our seniors who are listeners, or senior parents listening as well, some of whom may have been accepted and they're trying to make final decisions and all that. I know one of the big determining factors, you mentioned cost, that it's a very
Mhm.
expensive university. We
Yep,
looked up, it's like something like the tuition's around 58,000. I think it's where we were last quoted. It's going up,
it's
up,
high.
up.
It's high.
um, what are we talking about in terms of like stuff like scholarships? So, so many of our students, they are very strong academic students. So how it works with academic scholarships and then also stuff like talent scholarships. How does that work if we're trying to bring that cost down a little
It's
bit?
a combo platter. So there is we supply our scholarship recommendations based on what we saw in the auditions, at the same time that the financial aid package goes to the university and the admissions office. It's a complicated process, I'll tell you that. Looks at the academic portions of it, and then that each one of those are rated, and somehow they come up with some sort of calculus that, and I think thankfully I'm not privy to. What the university does is meet percentages of need, and they've been
Hmm.
doing it exceedingly well for our students in the last, I don't know, 10 years. Um, I don't think any administrator in the program should ever know really the financial information about any of our students.
Hmm.
But I do know when I look at renewal of scholarships that the university itself is meeting it. They're meeting it in a variety of ways. Some of it is direct financial aid, some of it is based on high scholastic achievement and
Hmm.
also high artistic achievement.
Hmm.
So when you put those three things together, depending on what the financial papers look like, the university will figure out what to do with that from there. In short, not a single financial aid package looks like the same for any
Right.
person. It is each uniquely drawn. So if you hear that um, student A got X dollars, it's really impossible to compare to student B.
Hmm.
No one really can know anybody else's true financial situation. I hate saying that, but I think it makes everything safer and quite frankly more democratic.
Yep.
That said, again, the university is doing a very, very good job of meeting needs. Um, and I'll just go ahead and say it for the millionth time in my life: the talent and the academic excellence that students come in with pays off.
Yep, totally. Well, and so I know the cost office is a big area in terms of why people choose or don't choose a school. I'd love to hear about like what are when you're making your decision, you're hearing your final decisions. I guess that's really now speaking toward last year since you haven't heard most of your final decisions for this year. But what makes a student say, you know what, this is what made me, this is what cinched me, this is what clinched my decision, and then what also maybe if they just say, hey, I'm actually going a different direction. Do you hear
Right.
feedback saying, actually, I don't. This is why I didn't choose Miami.
Yeah, I have the answers to that. Um, not I'm really not patting myself on the back. It's just something I think we do really, really well at the audition. I think
Hmm.
we're very good at that, and we speak the truth, and and that's the number one portion of it. The second is when they come to this campus and they see other students. Our
Hmm.
students are very warm, genial human beings that are very much vested in what the classes under them are going to look like. In our New York auditions and the unified auditions, we have so many New York actors that have graduated from us that really, quite frankly, I think the right word is insist on coming to the audition so they can
Uh-huh.
talk to possible students. It's an embarrassment of riches, quite frankly. That also, they hear kids that have graduated 10, 15 years out just going, "You need to come here." And then
Uh-huh.
when they come to school, they see the current crop of students and they speak to them. And then they sit on the classes and they go, oh, yeah. And then I'll spare everybody, but outside my window, it is really singularly the most beautiful place on earth.
Yeah.
Our campus is gorgeous, and as a side note, we were dehomed last year. Our old building came down, and just as we're speaking, I don't know why there's quiet right now, but the foundations are being laid for our new complex,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm very much looking forward to. So we're going to have spanking brand new facilities on
Mm-hmm.
basically what looks like a brand new campus.
Mm.
It's hard to say no to it. Everything points to that. And, I think when kids say no, it tends to be financial. It
Uh-huh.
does. We just can't meet their needs.
Right.
And it hurts me. It truly does. Um, have no say on what the financial aid office says when, someone who has 3 kids in school is being looked at X, Y, and
Right.
Z the same way. And I'll do everything. I'll write all sorts of notes, but it comes down to the legality of the financial aid papers.
Do you experience, I mean, this is a brand new I guess issue if it were to come up for you, but do you experience any, in like our current political climate, any families saying like, hey, I'm nervous about sending my kid to Florida, maybe if they're from New York or from California or,
I haven't heard from parents, but I have fielded this question. And I'll just be honest, I'm worried about in this state. However, we are a private institution in a very liberal city.
Mm-hmm.
And we are the theater department. And so we've been dealing with these issues since the dark ages.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I believe that everyone is safe on this campus.
We're going to take a short break. And on the back end, we're going to talk a little bit about the audition and admissions process a bit more. So we're back in a flash. We are back with David Williams, and we're going to talk a little bit about that magical audition process that he loves so much. We're going to talk a little bit about what you think makes a great audition for you. So, what do you want to see in those 10 minutes, 15 minutes, however long you're spending with the
I
students?
don't want to be boring, but I want to. Everybody says they want to see the person. I really do. I don't want to see something that's so highly polished it just looks like a rehearsal or memorization. I
Mm-hmm.
don't care if it's perfect or not. I want to be able to, at the end of it, ask questions about it. How did you choose that? Why did you choose that? I want to be able to say, how about try this? And it's probably wrong, but let me see you be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So the rehearsal, the audition really lets me know, are you really going to do what we need you to do in the theater? Are you going to be able to right away accept that you're just wrong and learn from it?
Uh-huh.
High school students are just so programmed. They got to give perfect tests. They got to do perfect monologues.
Uh-huh.
And so it's so, they're so tightly wound. I want someone who's relaxed and go, hey, give this a whirl and
Uh-huh.
assume that it's wrong, but assume that you can do it. And someone who can actually sit back and when I ask them, how did you do? Have some sort of answer, some sort of honest to God answer, not like, well, when I'm performing, I don't know anything. I get that. I'm
Yeah.
a performer as well, but I know what the experience for me was.
That question, I'll say, that question is one that I for so many years I've heard, and people always think it's a trick question. Like, what did he want me to say? What was I supposed to say? I was like, I think you're supposed to answer honestly. They're like, no, was this a good answer? Was that a good answer?
Any answer is good. No answer is not good. There's my
Yeah.
secret. It's also the sense of play. Someone who could smile and come in the room and okay, I'm going to get on my soapbox again.
Yeah.
Material that's appropriate to age. I may be old, but not that old. And also, these people who are auditioning are still very, very young. Acknowledge
Hmm.
that. Don't give material that just I'm going to have that it's going to make me uncomfortable to work with you
Hmm.
on it.
Hmm.
Um, and there's so much material out there. Second soapbox, Ask your coaches, does everybody do this? Now, I'll hear the same monologue over and over again,
Mhm.
but boy, am I interested when someone has found something that maybe nobody else has done.
Uh-huh.
And there's
Uh-huh.
so many plays. There's so many things to look at. That tells me there's a sense of wonder about our art form, that a student has looked and searched and read 1,000 books.
Mhm.
That's a student, not
Mhm.
someone who would say, "Here's 2 monologues, figure out which one you want." Anybody could do that.
Can you think of an example? I know it's putting you on the spot here, but can you think of an example of a student who, in that revealing of yourself where you went, you mentioned you really want them to seem easy and seem willing to try some things that are wrong. Can you think of an example of an audition that was particularly that way, and what made it really work for you?
I think a student that when a question is asked of why do you wanna go to university? Why did you do that monologue? And just something that there's an instant trust that the answer that would not have been an answer for anybody else in the room.
Uh-huh.
I felt safe to do it. I felt that I need to get away from where I am right now to feel safe to be able to be who I am, so I can feel safe to be able to portray things on stage, and I hear that a lot.
Mhm.
Students that come from some places in this country that it's hard for them to be themselves for a variety of reasons,
Mhm.
so desperately want out, and you can feel that desperation in the material that they've chosen, and how they need a home to be able to say it, which is what theater is, a home to be able to speak. And
Mhm.
when they express that, and then we try the monologue again right after that expression of
Mhm.
honesty, they go, "Oh, wow, I can channel all of this." It happens all the time.
Mhm.
Or you just get just an answer so out of left field about why they chose something or how they chose to portray it. It's just like, wow, this is someone who's thinking deeply, way beyond, this is what I was told, this is the right way to do it. It's just so fascinating to me. It's just you hear, aha, artist in the making. This
Yeah.
is this is someone worthy of doing this. This is someone I'd love to teach because it
Yep.
surprises me.
If you had to guess, because you mentioned at the beginning, we were talking about this, that the talent has to be there, right? If you had to guess how much in terms of the decision artistically for you to come to a yes or a no, how much of that is based on the talent you're seeing in the songs and the monologues versus some of those intangibles of how they take adjustments, how they do answer interview questions? How much is more about the musical and acting talent that you're seeing, and how much is more about what kind of student they are?
It's interesting because I couldn't give you a percentage or a ratio. I think what forces me into the in-depth portion of the interview is the obvious talent. If I see something that triggers something in me, that I guess that word is not usable in a positive way anymore, but it's something that sets off my brain wanting to know something about the person in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
The talent has just been checked off.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people get worried that sometimes maybe I'll hear 2 songs or 2 monologues,
Right.
and sometimes I'll hear 5 seconds, and all I wanna do is talk.
Uh-huh.
It's if I really want to upset myself, or if I'm feeling particularly in need of depression, I will open up and read any, like, the college boards or the chat boards to
Uh-huh.
find out what I want. It's, invariably wrong. Well, actually,
You're
let
like,
me
"Oh, I
change it.
want
It's
that? I didn't know I
always
wanted that." Yeah.
It's always wrong. I just why can't we interview someone just because of the person in front of us? I can't
Mhm.
follow a script for this. I follow a script for a
Mhm.
play, not for an interview.
Mhm.
I need to know things that you're gonna tell me that someone else is not. So, I'll hear an audition, and I will determine the course of my questioning from that.
Uh-huh. And it could be like the scholarships. Every person is gonna get a different question, different adjustments based on what you're saying. It's gonna be
Well,
individual to
right,
that. And
isn't that what we do? I mean,
yep.
maybe it's not everybody. I think it should be, but I think the practicality of larger programs make this difficult.
Uh-huh.
I think the other thing that makes our program really very good at what it does is I don't have to teach the same thing over and over and over and over and over again.
Uh-huh.
If you come in and sing a song, I'm only teaching you,
Uh-huh.
and it will not be the same lesson for that song, even though someone else sings it the same way. And the same thing for the material that we choose to cover. We look at our classes and go, we have 13 of these people. What do these 13 people need? And it goes also into what's most difficult for us picking our season selection, because it's
Hmm.
not picked on what we, as a faculty, just I'd love to direct. It's,
Right.
well, let's look at what everybody's done, put it down on a massive flow chart, and say, okay, David has only been in a Shakespeare and a small musical.
Uh-huh.
David needs to be in a large musical. Sally has never been in an ensemble in a musical. Sally's going there. Bert has never been in a play. And so we figure that out, and we figure it out because we truly consider casting as part of the curricula, and it's required or you
Yep.
can't graduate. And so I think this
Yep.
is very important. And so the choice of material in class, as well as the choice of material that we cover in production, is solely based on the student in front of us.
Yep. Well, another advantage of a smaller program that you
Yes.
can do that. I mean, you cannot do that if you have 200 students. It's not possible to
No, you
consider on
can't.
that level.
You can't
Yeah.
possibly. You can't.
Well, in terms of the admission, so let's say the artistically, you say yes, I love the student. The audition was good with the songs and monologues. They answer great interview questions. I really like them artistically or holistically from the audition. Now, as we look at the university, how does that work then with admission? With, you mentioned they have to have really strong academics,
Yeah.
SATs, essays. How do those things factor in if artistically you like the student?
Completely different beast, the admissions department. So
Hmm.
we will in a perfect world, it all happens as a unit. However, that perfect world is hard to define anymore. So I will do my auditions, and the university gets the applications. I will have my list ready. They will have their list ready.
Hmm.
We'll look at the Venn diagram, and then we'll go, okay, da 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 da. What about this kid? What about that kid? And so there will be a conversation on the kids that are not inside the intersections.
That are not inside the
Um,
academic bubble. So you're going to say, oh, they're a little below. I really love them. Can I get them back
whether
in?
or not that happens, because
Right.
I think fortunately for me, maybe unfortunately, I'm not sure. I'm not supposed to know their academic history when I audition them.
Uh huh.
If I did, I think it would taint how I do the auditions.
Uh huh.
I would have preconceived notions. So then it comes, and then we go, okay, but this kid is this. Oh dear, they can't write. Let's see what the veracity of that is.
Uh huh.
And there's some trading back and forth. And then we figure out how to make the class.
Yep.
And we don't operate as a conservatory. I can't say, okay, I'm offering you a place.
Right.
It has to be a general university offer.
But so you will look at the academics yourself, but only after the audition. So before the
Yeah,
audition, you won't have read the essays or any of that kind of stuff, but you might do
I
that
will
afterward.
read what I have asked for in our
Uh huh.
supplemental application, but it
Right.
will not be granular, and it also will probably be self-reported. And so it's
Uh
not
huh.
anything that the university is going to look for. Now, they look very seriously at our recommendations. There's no question about that. And I think this actually may be one of the most important things I'll say today. The university's application pool each year goes up, the university as a whole,
Uh huh.
geometrically.
Uh huh.
There are tens and tens and tens of thousands more applicants each year,
Uh
and
huh.
so they look at it more and more stringently.
Yep.
Um, they're very good with us. We're a small little school in a massive university, and I take up an inordinate amount of their time, probably to their chagrin. But hey, I'm not shy. Um, but it gets done,
Yep.
and every year I look at an incoming class and go, "Wow, how did that happen?" It seems
Yep.
like magic, quite frankly, and knock some sort of wood. Um, they're remarkable classes. I have some of the best classes I've seen in years.
And you mentioned that in general, as the academic department is looking at the grades, SATs, et cetera, that they are judging them as if they're applying for physics. That really they're not getting a little
Yep.
bit of a lower standard academically because it's the theater department.
No,
They're looking at them the exact
no.
same.
I don't
Yep.
know. The rules for admission is always in flux, and COVID, that thing that happened,
Oh yeah.
put everything in a strange way. Like many universities, the SAT, ACT scores were you could submit them. This year, I think
Right.
maybe the last one where is optional.
Uh huh.
um, GPA is important. What school?
And just for our listeners, sorry, this year meaning last year, by the way, with SAT, ACT, right?
Yes,
You're saying
yes,
that
yes.
for
I mean,
last year
this year
seniors,
that
these juniors will have to take it.
I literally, as we're speaking, hit submit on my final list for this year. As you're
Yay!
speaking,
All right,
it
we're
scared
gonna
me,
read
so
them
I
all
quit.
out loud on the pod. Tell us who they are.
I will be fired faster than the speed of light, and I wouldn't do that because it kill. I'm going to just go out. It kills me. We've seen so so thank everybody who's prepared kids around the country. This year's crop of applicants has been
Mm,
extraordinarily high.
yeah.
It's I've seen s- so many kids, and I would take if I could, I would take a class of 60, and I could
Uh huh.
easily do it. I
Yep.
can't, and it kills me to make a decision between one extraordinary student and the next. It's my least favorite thing.
Well, you're leading
Um,
me perfectly into my next question, because we hear that all the
oh,
time. I've heard this from from our professors at Carnegie Mellon. They used to say we could take class of 80 or 100, who some number, but then they end up taking 12 musical theater, 12
well,
actors, or whatever. Yeah. And so, how do you when you have 60 students who have earned their place, 60 students who are
yeah.
good enough to get in your mind? How do you get from 60 to 14 or 15 or whatever you're going to try to yield exactly?
Well, I do it as if I were, and it's only at this point that I do this. Their headshots go down or on the floor or up on a board, and we go, okay, what do we need to serve our department? What plays have we not been able to do?
Mm-hmm.
What what are we missing? What how will this class not be a replica of any other class?
Mm-hmm.
It's a little vague, but I guessed if I were going to winnow it down to a couple of words, I think we're casting
Uh-huh. And then how
like
does it
a
work in the
show,
process?
like a
Uh,
show.
Obviously, knowing you're not going to yield 100% of who you admit, then how
No,
does that work with you in the waitlist process? Then of going, those 60 students probably got in some other schools too, and you're trying
yeah,
to have
absolutely.
them say yes to your school, and then how does it work as you adjust the casting? As people say no, and as people come off other
I
waitlists,
think
etc.
that I don't want to open up a floodgate of this, but I think students who have been very good at writing and letting us know where their desires are, and being honest,
Mm-hmm.
I got into Carnegie Mellon and I didn't get into UMich or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But you Miami is my number one choice right now. That
Right.
that information, if it reads honestly,
Yep.
is really helpful in putting things into order. Now, I'm hesitant to say that because then all of a sudden every kid will be writing,
Right.
and then we can't figure that out. But I think that the secret to getting into schools is being completely honest with your needs, financial, academic,
Yep.
emotional, figuring out what type of school actually serves you the best. There is a remarkable difference between the styles that schools use to teach, but all great BFA programs, the truth is, you're going to graduate with a great degree and the ability to do something. It's how you
Mm-hmm.
get there. And so reading these letters from students or applicants lets me know right away. I think this is the right this student is expressing
Mm-hmm.
the right kind of words that feel right for a student here. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I've been doing this a
Mm-hmm.
long time, and I can often tell within one or two schools where someone's going to wind up.
Mm-hmm.
And my ultimate thought on that is it we cannot we're doing all these applicants a disservice if we let anybody wrap their dream school into one bundle and
Ain't that
think
the truth?
their
Ain't that the
self-worth
truth?
will be gone.
Yep.
The numbers are against people. It's
Yep.
I hate saying that. There are just so many kids wanting to do this. But everybody will wind up in the school if they do their
Yes.
due diligence. They will wind up in the right place.
Right. It is not a career where you can ever have that kind of control.
No, it's out.
Right.
But if you get accepted, it terrifies me, and it doesn't happen often. But it's like, oh, I didn't know you were coming to school. I've never seen you since your audition.
Uh-huh.
If you can afford it, go to the schools you've been accepted
Yep.
at. I know my school's not right for everybody. I know who it is
Yep.
right for. And, kids that need to get lost in a big city and be away from everything, they need to be in New York or Chicago.
Yep.
But kids that need other things will know what they get here.
You keep looking out of your beautiful window as you're saying this. I can see that you're taking in this gorgeous campus, and it's making me jealous.
Oh,
It's fine.
pretty.
I want to wrap up a little bit. You mentioned some of the changes of like maybe so now the SATs are going to be required, and some of the things that as we emerge from the kind of into this post-pandemic world, as I've been saying it, that
Let
the
us hope
pandemic is
that's
not
what it
completely
is.
over,
Yes.
but as we emerge from it, right? What is carrying forward for you? Is there anything in terms of virtual auditions that's keeping forward? Any of the sort of progress that Miami may have made in terms of racial equity, or in terms of some of the conversations that have been happening for the past 2-3 years? What are we taking forward out of the pandemic moment?
I'm taking so much out of it. I think we cannot and will not um, get rid of the possibility of virtual auditions. I think it's important.
Hmm.
The industry is doing it. However, there is something that is intangible about being one-on-one with someone that I
Yep.
find really important. Now, granted, there are people around the country and around the world that just can't do it. And to the part of the diversity, yes, and that plays into it there. I would like people from the rest of the world to have the opportunity to be able to do this, and the only way maybe is to do the virtual and also the fiscal. It costs a lot of money to go do all these auditions,
Uh-huh.
um, and so I'm not the fiscal portion of it is irrelevant to me. It's making sure, and quite frankly, you and I have been speaking for a couple of days right now,
Yep.
and we definitely understand each other,
Yep.
and there's something valuable here. But there's something a little bit different. There's a power imbalance between auditor and auditioner that I
Yeah.
think is more easily broken down when we're one on one, and they can realize,
Yep.
yes, we're relaxed. Let us be honest. That's not to say that Zoom and its friends are not a great tool, but I don't think it's the best way to audition. But
Yep.
our industry is using it, and to an extent, right? So I'm not willing to throw it out. The diversity thing, I don't know how to fix it, um, other than to start way back at very early age in early education. But it
Hmm.
is vital if we as theater people cannot put on stories that look like the world. I don't know what we're doing.
Hmm.
And our university is doing a lot to make that happen. And I have great hopes that we are making great strides there. Um, that there is my switch to somber. It's so vital. It's just the number one thing that's on my mind. How do we tell
Hmm.
stories that are worthy of being heard and worthy of being told, and the ones that are necessary to be told and heard?
Let's wrap with some advice, and maybe I'd love to give us some advice specifically to our parent listeners. Maybe if
Yes.
I'm a parent of a junior, especially, I'm beginning my research, and I'm trying to put together my college list, and how am I gonna, I really want to help my child as they're moving forward into the pre-screen season and auditions, et cetera. So, what advice would we have to those parents who are just embarking on this process?
So much, quite frankly. And none of what I'm going to say is tongue in cheek, although I think it may come off humorously. Um, Relax. Find people that you can trust to instruct your children, to get them ready, to truly trust them, and not wrap your parental self-worth up in this.
Hmm.
I often see in the Unifieds parents who are just making things much too stressful for their students and
Mm-hmm.
quite frankly for other kids in the hallways. I'm saying this most sincerely. It doesn't help. Um, I would prefer that parents stay on their own floor. I'm being serious here, and let their children be children who are auditioning for the theater.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need to be professional auditors. That holds for me at least. I'm sure I would love to see a perfect audition, but it is not what I'm looking for. I would
Mm-hmm.
like as much relaxation to come in, so honesty can come out when people are so stressed in an already stressed situation. My heart breaks for these kids, and that's my number one suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, let the kids be honest to what they're capable of doing, and that will happen. Any type of I came from a mother who's you were going to practice, and that was fine, but not when I was auditioning or in school.
Mm-hmm.
It dawned on me that I needed to do that on my own, and it may have been the smartest thing I ever did as a young human being, and I'm a firm believer in that. And and there's some great parents out there that I adore, and they're very important. But I'm really only interested in the audition
Yep.
and the human that's auditioning. The other stuff, and I got to say that resume, I love having it, but I love it mostly for the headshot so I can keep track. It's important to some schools. It's important maybe for the academic portion, but for me, I find everything in the audition. I don't need to
Uh-huh.
be told that somebody's daughter or son or other just won a X, Y, and Z award. I don't
Yeah.
need that.
You're
I
like,
need
I'll
to
see it in the
see
room. Yeah. Yeah,
exactly,
totally.
and I think that's really also something. You don't need to sell. I don't need to be sold
Uh-huh.
anything. The kid is going to audition, and that's it.
I love the phrase parental self-worth. It's I've asked this now of whatever, have 40 some schools. That's a new phrase that I think is so smart. Well, David, I thank you so much for the time. If people want to check out more stuff about Miami, where's the best place for them to go?
To the University of Miami Department of Theater Arts website, or you can send us an email and get in touch with me. It would be my
Awesome.
pleasure. We take this may be the most important job I have.
Yeah, we love it. That contact info will be in the show notes. We'll have links to check out everything that people need to know. Well, David, thank you so much for the time today. This was really such a pleasure.
I enjoyed this immensely. I truly did. I could talk about my program forever, apparently.
Oh, hey now. I hope you enjoyed that interview with David. He is so warm and easy to chat with, and you can really tell he's been doing this for many years. Not only his intimate knowledge of the process, but some of those specific insights in terms of pitfalls people have fallen into in the past really speak toward his many years of experience. There are about 12 takeaways I want to do from this episode, but I do have to leave some meat on the bone for future podcasts. And I am blessedly realizing how many of these things we have at least somewhat touched on in previous episodes. By next year, I think this takeaway section might just be like a full glossary pointing you to different previous episodes where I'm just adding footnotes or little additional comments. For those who are newer to the pod, please listen to the end of our Texas State acting pod with Neil Patrick Stewart or University of Arizona with Danny Gerwin to hear a bit more about the confusion between the way different schools will use the word conservatory and liberal arts. I thought David navigated that really well, and very interestingly, Miami being a school we would call a BFA liberal arts school, but it's definitely confusing with different language for different schools and how they think about categorizing themselves. I've also talked before about chat boards. I thought it was really funny, him talking about how chat boards identified him. So check out our Indiana University episode where we talk about that. I appreciated David's take on them. Similarly, I love the way he phrased the willingness to be wrong when given an adjustment. Or maybe if we translate that into MTCA language, it would be not holding the piece so tightly and needing to be right, which leaves room for the magical/transcendent work to be a possibility. We outlined that a bit in our Syracuse episode with Tom Miller, so feel free to listen back to that if you want to hear all about adjustments. I also feel like we've talked in a number of ways about his parental advice of not letting too much of your own self-worth be wrapped up in your child. I think that's great advice and very eloquently phrased, and I underline that as a note to my future parental self. So please listen back to those episodes if you want more on those topics, as I think all of them, which we heard today, are worthy of a deeper dive. But today, I just want to do 2 small takeaways aimed specifically at any class of 2023 listeners who are checking this out right as they're potentially making their final decision. We had a nice long takeaway from our SCAD episode 2 weeks ago about the budgeting of hours that schools use. And I just want to clarify an addendum to that based on what David said here. When you're evaluating curriculum, for those out there finishing and rechecking their scorecards, as Leo assigns you to do, make sure you are translating credits into hours in the week. That should be something you should find from the school themselves, or of course could get from an alumni student. What does a specific week look like with the hours of the day, as opposed to just a credit list that you might more easily find on a website? And this is because, as David says, especially with theater programs, a credit is not a credit is not a credit. This may also be true of non-theater college credits. I'm less familiar with them from school to school, but I can say for sure with theater and musical theater programs, they're often doing exactly what David mentioned and really shrinking the class of a credit hour to meet the needs of their program, because what they do might not easily translate into the university system at large. So if you compare 2 credits of acting at one school versus 4 at another school, that does not actually mean necessarily that you're taking double the acting at the second school. It should mean that, but in order to make the schedules work, many schools will manipulate the math of what a credit hour is to the point of unrecognizability. This is at least partially because musical theater classes, despite having significant outside work from class, do not have the same homework load that a physics class might. So where another major might take 15 credits, meaning 15 hours of class time in a week, knowing they have a ton of work outside of class they'll have to complete, a musical theater major might be in class for more than 30 hours a week before you even start counting stuff like rehearsal and crew hours, which can be really significant. But if they gave out the 60 credits for the hours you're actually working, you'd be graduated from school in like 1 year, and that wouldn't work out too well for the university. Which is not to say that you all need to do a lot of this math or translation of what a credit hour is and what kind of, multiplication table do I need to make this all match up. I would just make sure you have a detailed sample schedule in days and hours so that you really understand what your week will be like. This is the kind of thing also that you do not necessarily need to go incredibly deep on in your beginning research. So any younger listeners out there, if your class is 2024, 2025, as I say this, so if you're a junior or sophomore as you're doing this, this might not be the thing that you go deep on with the 50 schools you're looking at the very beginning. But you definitely do want to be incredibly specific on all of this kind of stuff before you make your final decision. And exactly when you do this level of specificity really varies family by family. Some it'll be a little earlier in the process, some a little bit later. You're going to do what you can do to have this information. But certainly before you choose to go to school to a place like this, you want to make sure you know what is the schedule actually going to be. The other takeaway I want to hit on is not too specific to David, but does go back to our class of 2023 and making your final decision, where we all are in this place right now. You may have noticed I ask each school that has a musical theater program or an emphasis like that, which of the 3 disciplines of musical theater they emphasize the most. For a while there, I kept saying like legs of the stool. I'm not sure why that was the thing that was sticking in my craw, but it was like, which leg of the stool are you? Is it one of the legs longer than the other? I don't know, but you're going to get that for like last year. I was doing that a lot. Just to let you behind the curtain a little bit, this is not because I think it's important you go through and actually categorize each school specifically and label it an acting-based school or this is a music-heavy program, etc. As I think you'll make some of those decisions based on the above credit hours deep dive, and you'll get some of that reputationally from how others will discuss the school. But I do want you to pay attention to the different ways they talk about that question. I think it's really interesting to get a sense of the philosophy of a school in the way they talk about their equality of all 3 disciplines, or do they emphasize one of the disciplines specifically there, or even more importantly, how they talk about what's most important to train a young artist. I mean, I love David's comments about style in this question. I thought that was very interesting, right? And I also love that he said first, second, third, and 100th that they're an acting program. Even for other schools that say acting is primary, they may not want to put all top 100 spots on acting and only have 101 be singing or 102 be dance or whatever. And again, that's not to say to read too much into a quick answer about a school's philosophy and then say, okay, that means their song and dance training is somehow lesser because of it. But you can get a sense of the vibe and how it lines up philosophically with what you're looking for. That's it. The 101st episode in the books. After this one, it will be a while before the number is exciting again, so I'll probably just stop saying it. But I won't stop saying how great it is to have Meghan Cordier producing these episodes, and I certainly won't stop encouraging you to rate and review us wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And let's be honest, if you made it this far in the episode, we're one of your favorite podcasts. I think we just need to admit that to ourselves. Don't forget to follow our socials at Mapping the College Audition on Instagram and MTCA on all our various social media platforms in the show notes, as well as popping over to mtcollegeauditions.com on the old internet browser if you want some of the best individual college coaching you can find on this planet. And if you want to see photos of me covered in stickers for my daughter, you can follow me at Charmer7 as well on all my social medias. To my young artists out there mapping their journeys, is the plural of takeaway takeaways or takes away? There are multiple takes that are being brought away, but somehow that feels wrong. We'll see you next week.